We recognize this is a big problem. The last administration left us a dismantled and unworkable system. And like any other problem, we are going to do everything we can to solve it.
No, you're not. And you aren't, and it wasn't broken. Kids, cartels, and chaos. That's the lethal mix of the border as Republicans yet to see for themselves how bad this actually is in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas and California. The Biden administration's answer, blame Trump. I'm not buying it. I don't think you're buying it. Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, he's on the Homeland Security Committee and Finance Committees as well. He was just on the Arizona border this weekend. Senator, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Brian, very much.
Listen, you could blame President Trump on a lot of things, and everyone does. Sometimes I have to apologize later, like the Washington Post did yesterday. But you can't blame him for the border situation left to the Biden administration, can you?
Yeah, there's no way you can actually do that. He was improving the border situation significantly, and the policies that he put in place finally put some order into the border situation. They weren't inhumane. He was trying to actually be humane and try to keep kids out of the hands of cartels and human traffickers and to be able to keep families together. And he was literally working to keep families together in Central America, not have them separated out, not have kids trafficked. And for that, he's being criticized and attacked. And I would tell you, being down in Arizona and talking to Border Patrol there and Customs and Border Protection, it's pretty remarkable what is happening now on the border versus what was happening just a few months ago there.
Let me just give you some stats. As of Sunday morning, U.S. Border Patrol was holding 4,200 unaccompanied migrant children in short-term holding cells, including jail-like stations unfit to house minors. That, according to government records reviewed by CBS. Nearly 3,000 of the children in CBP custody have been held longer than 72 hours. Why is that significant?
Yeah, it's significant because obviously the accusation from Democrats to President Trump was that that he was putting kids in cages and keeping them, but somehow those exact same facilities they're calling humane detention and temporary holding space. But when it was that exact same facility when President Trump was there, he was keeping kids in cages. So it's the hypocrisy of what's going on. But also the folks that are there along the border would tell you, hey, we're not set up to handle kids. And when I say kids, by the way, the vast majority of when they talk about kids are 16 and 17-year-old males. When I was there and asked directly, okay, we talk about everyone 17 and younger, who is it really that's coming? Overwhelmingly, the number are 16 and 17-year-old males that are connecting with an uncle or aunt or a cousin who's already illegally present in the United States. They want to be able to connect with them. They've lined up a place for them to be able to work and to be able to live, and they've contacted them and said, come, and they're coming. And when they get across the border, literally if they can get one toe across the border, then suddenly they've got to be able to connect them with folks inside the country in this Biden method that he's actually trying to execute now.
So I've been to the border 3 times total. Last time was with the Secretary of Defense and the head of the Border Protection, and they let me talk to Border Patrol people. They let me go to the border in a squad car, in a Border Patrol car, in an SUV, and then they sat there. And while I talked to them, other migrants walked up, and I'd say, "Can I talk to them?" They go, "Yeah." And through a translator, I talked to them. You cannot get that access now. What happened?
Yeah, it's a pretty big shift that's actually happening just in the access point. I'm on the committee of jurisdiction dealing with border security, so I had no problem getting access to people. But I was able to go to the border, actually go to the wall. In fact, I went to one of the areas in Arizona where construction has stopped on the wall, because that's one of the things that I wanted to be able to see is when President Biden said stop all construction on the border, somehow we get this feeling that the wall is being constructed linearly, and so they just kind of stopped and there's an ending point. That's not how it really works. The wall is a wall system, and President Trump said this all the time. It's not just a fence. That's what everybody sees first. But you've got a border wall that's there. You've got a road on the other side of it so they can patrol it. They put in ground sensors, so if someone walks across it, it sets off a sensor, and they can get a chance to be able to track them. There are cameras and lights that are a part of that system, so it's a whole wall system. Well, in this area in Arizona outside of Tucson, which is There's a city in Mexico of 450,000 people. This is not just open desert area with no one around. There's 450,000 people on the other side of the border. This fence that's up literally has huge gaps in it because they were building the fence for miles and miles and miles, and they were putting in the gates to be able to transition so they can get to the other side and clean it out as they need to. None of those gates have been put up. So the materials are all there on the ground, but there's these huge gaps in the fence for miles and miles because they were in the process of putting the gates up, but all that had to stop. The road there is not finished. The technology is not installed. The cameras aren't there. The lights aren't there. All of those things aren't there. There's no reason that you would have miles and miles and miles of fence except for these big gaps that are all in it, unless you want to actually just leave the fence open. I mean, there's no other rational purpose for saying we've already paid for it. The contractor's already there. Why would you want to leave gaps in a fence unless you're wanting to invite people to be able to go through those gaps?
Senator James Lankford with us of Oklahoma. Senator, do you know politics? It would be so easy for Joe Biden to have said, listen, it's paid for. We have a situation with a pandemic. I'm going to let them finish what's paid for, and I'm going to stop it. That keeps his left happy. And the right would say, yeah, listen, the money is there. So they bought the fence. You either got to pay to store it or destroy it. And you don't put it up. It makes no sense. It's against America's interests. But you mentioned Arizona. There's another problem. We're in a pandemic. The mayor of Gila Bend, I might have said that wrong, but it's not necessarily on the border. His name is Chris Riggs. Cut 10.
At this point, what we're looking at is we're a very economically depressed community. We can barely afford to take care of the people that we have here in our community now. And as of the 2nd, Border Patrol advised us they're basically going to drop people off here and do sort of like this, and they're your problem. And we just do not have the ability to care for these people. They're not able to give us how many. They can't give us what the background on these people are. They can't tell us what their health issues are. I've got a lot of seniors and elders that are very susceptible to COVID.
What does he do?
Yeah, he is in a bad spot. He's stuck because the Biden team has reinstituted catch and release. That it's a situation where adults, and these are not minors that are coming in, these are adults coming in that if they say they want to have asylum, they can say, okay, well, we'll just go ahead and release you out. And they'll literally take them to a bus station, like in his town, and we'll drop them off right there at that spot, and we'll say, okay, you can catch a bus ride to wherever you want to be able to go in the country, and then show up 2 years from now at a court hearing. But in the meantime, short term, they're literally just living in this town that they just dropped them off at, and they put them on the street and say, have at it. So they're in the country. If they've had a COVID test at all, it's been done by some outside organization. And as we know, many of these individuals may test negative one day, but they've been early exposed, and then they may test positive 2 days later. There is no real tracking that's going on with this, and so it's not just a COVID issue. It's also a bigger problem with this. That's why one of the biggest fears of the Border Patrol right now is the Biden team is going to change what's Title 42 authority gets thrown around. Right now they have the ability, if someone crosses the border, to be able to turn them right back around and say, for health reasons, we're going to turn you around. If they drop that, it's going to take a bad situation and make it catastrophic on the border. So not only it's fixing the fence, but it's really keeping the Trump policies in place that'll help lower the number of people illegally crossing the border.
So, Senator, so I know you wanted to see the fence, and you described a lot of it in response to my questions. But overall, when you go up to your constituents in Oklahoma, what are you going to tell them about this? Because it's not the first crisis we've had at the border. To me, it's the first time I've seen an administration not admit it's a crisis. President Obama admitted it was a crisis. He flew the vice president to Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and talked to those governments about controlling their population. But he wouldn't even go to the border. So what are you going to tell the people of Oklahoma?
Yeah, the people of Oklahoma think a fence makes common sense. And everyone that says, well, if you got a 30-foot fence, you'll get a 31-foot ladder and get over it. Everyone says that's a really cute little saying, except for if you've got a 31-foot ladder, that slows you down to come to it and gives Border Patrol enough time to be able to get to you and to be able to do interdiction. We know fences actually work. and the Border Patrol will tell you fences actually work. So that's number one on it. It just makes common sense to be able to have that barrier. The second thing on it is that literally day one of the Biden administration, he canceled the emergency on the border and said there is no emergency on the border and canceled that with an executive order. Then, so help me, 5 weeks later, he just announced that he is calling in FEMA to come help with the problems at the border. Well, hello, what does FEMA stand for? Federal Emergency Management Agency. So he one day says there is no emergency, and then a few weeks later calls in the emergency management team to be able to go manage what's happening at the border, but he refuses to call it a crisis. But clearly, he sees it as an emergency, what he used to not see, because there are major problems that are brewing there, and it is just the beginning. There are thousands and thousands of people that are coming towards our border trying to be able to work through this. And when I brought up with Mayorkas, the new head of DHS, and said, what is your message to the migrants that are coming, his response to me was, I would tell them to wait, not yet. Well, not yet means go to them and to the coyotes that are smuggling people in to say, we're going to let you in. Just give us a couple of weeks before you come. They've said, okay, now is the time to be able to take off.
Here's what Ben Cardin said yesterday about infrastructure, caught on mic, a hot mic, with the Secretary of Transportation.
But ultimately, it's going to be put together similar to how the rescue plan was put together. It's got to be at the end of the day, because you're most likely to have these reconciliations. The Republicans will be with you to a point. And then
he's saying that infrastructure is going to be done through reconciliation. I thought Mr. Come Together, I represent all Americans, was going to be bipartisan in infrastructure. So does that mean you guys should even try? Ben Cardin's going to jam it down our throats?
Yeah, there's only one way to do a partisan infrastructure package, and that's if you know you're going to put something in it that is so toxic and is so lefty and destructive to the future of our country that they realize no Republican's going to join it. Republicans are passionate about infrastructure as well. We all fly, we all drive on roads. We're out as well. We understand the basics of infrastructure in our country and know that's a federal responsibility. So you don't find Republicans opposed to infrastructure. So there's only one reason they would try to do a partisan infrastructure package, and that's if they know they're really going to put some toxic liberal agenda in it.
I just don't know if reconciliation qualifies under infrastructure. No one's giving me a clear answer because it has to be financially oriented, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. It has to be about debt or it has to be about spending. You can't put policy in a reconciliation package. So if you're going to do infrastructure, there's lots of policy issues that deal with infrastructure. They're going to try to just load this up with money and in all likelihood do a huge tax increase in it that they'll try to say this is how we're going to try to accomplish this, is this big tax increase. And they already know that Republicans are going to say that's the wrong way to go.
Oh, so then it will qualify for reconciliation.
If they just did a tax increase and straight spending, yes, they could actually, but they can't do any policy in it as well. As they learned quickly on the $15 an hour minimum wage, that's really a policy thing they tried to say was budget related.
And they tried to get a bridge in Buffalo, and they tried to get a transit system in San Francisco, and that got rejected too, right?
Well, actually, that didn't get rejected. We just called it out so often that eventually Schumer and Pelosi backed off of it.
Oh, I thought the parliamentarian pulled that out.
Yeah, well, so they were a little embarrassed eventually to be able to. Their own side was trying to have a hard time defending that bad spending and that earmark that they had stuck in, along with a lot of other stuff. As you know well and your listeners know well, the COVID package was not about COVID. We had already done 5 COVID bills bipartisan in the last year. We understand the need, and we could have done a 6th COVID package, but it wouldn't have looked like this, and they knew it.
Senator, thanks so much for reaching out and then, of course, coming out and telling our audience exactly what you saw at the border. Nothing matters more. Senator James Lankford, thank you.
You bet, Brian. Thank you.
Back in a moment.